The World Cup. That's where players announce themselves. Heroes are born, legends first whispered, and crowns forged. That's where kings of soccer are anointed. Yet no one understood and exemplified the myth-making quality of the World Cup quite like Zinedine Zidane. From his arrival in the public consciousness
Zidane peut-être. Ah oui, bien joué, passement de jambe, attention, frappe, et but. Oh, celui-là, il est beau.
to his final sternum-rattling exit as a player.
Oh my word, that is extraordinary. A headbutt to the chest of Materazzi. A shameful incident that marks his last act on a football field. The last match of his career irreparably tarnished.
Let me set the scene for you. It was Zidane's last game as a player, the final of the 2006 World Cup. Italy versus France, and the stakes were deliriously, mind-bogglingly high.
Between them, they've won 4 World Cups. Their combined record, just 1 defeat in their last 51 internationals. The 2006 FIFA World Cup journey started a month ago in Munich. Tonight here in Berlin, we'll find out who will take Brazil's crown and earn the right to call themselves the champions of the world.
The goals came quickly. Zidane, who else, scored a penalty barely a handful of minutes into the match. But Materazzi, Italy's backup central defender only starting because of Nesta's injury, equalized a dozen minutes later. And that's how it stayed. A tense, gripping final, slipping past 90 minutes. The match stumbled into extra time, where Zidane's header brought a stunning reflex save from Gianluigi Buffon. And 5 minutes later, it happened. I'm still not quite sure what to call it.
Zinedine. Oh Zinedine. Pas ça.
Pas du tout avec
Pas
Zinedine.
ça Zinedine. Pas ça Zinedine.
Zidane turned and walked down the tunnel. It was his last action as a player, his last impact on the field, still reverberating down Materazzi's spine and into French fans' stomachs. The game went to penalties.
It all comes down to this. 12 years ago, Roberto Baggio missed from the spot in the final against Brazil. But if Fabio Grosso can put this penalty away, then the Azzurri will win the World Cup. Italy are champions of the world!
That Italy won the World Cup almost feels like a footnote to the real moment. Zidane's moment. The king of soccer abdicating his throne. This is the story of everything leading up to that moment. I'm Nando Vila, and this is the best soccer podcast in the world.
Vamos, Diego, lo estaban agarrando. Canigia, la ley de la ventaja. Canigia, ahora o nunca. El triunfo, Canigia, gol!
Michael Owen, he's got goals with him, but it's still Owen. Oh, what a goal! Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo, yes! Oh, yes!
The goal all of Italy wanted to see. The man they wanted in the Italian team.
Oh, that's brilliant! Oh, that's wonderful! That is a magnificent goal!
Go Brazil! Pelé!
Zidane was a different sort of soccer player.
What a player, jeez.
For a guy who never talked very much, he certainly made a lot of noise. And look, he won. He won a lot. He achieved a lot. There's no question.
People that either played with him or played against him would be the first people to tell you that he was operating on a different plane.
A swan that graced across the pitch, pulling off moves that may have seemed slow but were nonetheless lethal. Always with the ball glued to his cleats, he had amazing control and capacity with both feet. A technical prodigy with a deep understanding of the game, which in the end is what allows a player to transform individual mastery into a collective legacy.
Ball as much as possible. Two of the best sides in Spain, but there are not many players. Zidane!
Always reserved and introverted, but with a sense of humor and warmth for those close to him. Zidane was overflowing with technique, but it came from a place of icy determination. Here's former US player Alexi Lalas.
Zidane was the quiet or silent assassin, and it was almost as if he played with a belief that it was almost beneath him to even be there with you. And, that beautiful arrogance. I almost feel like Zidane, there were times where his fury and his anger on the field was because it was so easy for him, and that he was operating on a different plane. That's how good he was.
Lalas is now a pundit for Fox Sports. Let's start from the beginning. At 16 years of age, in May of 1989, a slender Frenchman debuted in Ligue 1. Soon after, he signed a historic contract with Girondins de Bordeaux. There, under the wing of big names that would accompany him for the rest of his career, such as Vicente Lizarazu and Christophe Dugarry, he began his rise to the peak. Specifically in a 1996 UEFA quarterfinal match against Milan. After losing 2-0 in the away game, the French side turned the tables in the home leg with a score of 3-0. Zidane was already in star mode.
Zidane,
it's like dancing.
His balance for a big man is just incredible.
Zidane's prowess led Bordeaux, a modest but renowned team, to the UEFA Cup final against the powerful Bayern Munich. His team lost, but Zidane earned himself a contract with Juventus. He would hone his talents in what was at the time the world's best league. And during his first season, he reached the final of the Champions League, but lost to Borussia Dortmund. The following year, more of the same. He once again reached the Champions League final, only to lose against Real Madrid. It seemed like Zidane needed a big win to get over the hump and enter the pantheon of truly great players. And that summer, he had the perfect opportunity. The 1998 World Cup was coming to France. But the managerial decisions on the national team left a lot of questions. More about what happened next after the break. In 1998, France wasn't a particularly flashy team. It was a pretty defensive side and famously lacked a truly elite goal scorer. The 1998 World Cup started smoothly enough for France with a 3-0 win over South Africa. In the second game, against Saudi Arabia, Zidane's temper flared up and he stomped on an opponent.
Some people forget is that Zidane gets himself sent off against Saudi Arabia. And it's not like they go and dominate after that. But, against Italy, it goes to penalties. They get through in the semi-final with, I think, a little bit of good fortune.
This is Gabriele Marcari, who covered this World Cup. He's now a senior writer for ESPN. Zidane rejoined the team, and France was able to beat Italy in penalties thanks to a sublime Fabien Barthez intervention. During the semifinals, France once again pulled off an epic performance in order to beat Croatia and Davor Suker, who was the great revelation of the tournament. He was by no means the star of the tournament. The best player in the World Cup was Brazil's Ronaldo, who Zidane would face in the final. And that Brazil team was stacked, with a lineup that also included Rivaldo and Bebeto. Brazil, the reigning world champion, was the favorite to win. But Zidane let the ball speak for him.
Djokaev. Zidane!
France gained the upper hand in the final with a header from Zidane. It was surprising because Zidane was not known for his aerial prowess. And moments before the halftime whistle,
Petit. Zidane!
With the whistle blown and France clearly in the ascendancy, the first half of the match was over. The hosts led 2-0. And the team followed the lead of captain Didier Deschamps. Total commitment in the second half, with Emmanuel Petit widening the gap on the scoreboard.
Emmanuel Petit! 3! Made in Highbury, finished in Paris. The World Cup belongs to France.
On July 12, 1998, Deschamps lifted the World Cup trophy. But all of the lights of the Saint-Denis Stadium shone on Zinedine Zidane's gleaming bald head. He was probably not the best player in the tournament, but he played the decisive role on the most important day.
And then in the final, he delivers the win. But again, that's the final where there's the whole Ronaldo mystery.
However, like only the greatest players are able to do, Zidane inextricably linked his name with the most momentous goals on the grandest stage. And beyond the goals, he was truly great in the final. You can go on Twitter and see compilations of Zidane's best plays in that game, and he really bossed it. From that moment on, whenever he set foot on a field, the attention of the world would turn toward him over anyone else. The power of a World Cup had been unleashed on the world's greatest star.
When you live the power of a World Cup, it provides opportunities.
Alexi Lalas had stormed into global consciousness 4 years earlier when the United States hosted World Cup '94.
I am a living example of the power of a World Cup and what it can do and how it can change an individual. And you recognize it to a certain extent at the time, and then when it's done, you really recognize it.
2 years later, France entered the 2000 Euro Cup. Second place in the group stage was good enough to qualify for the quarterfinals, where they met Spain. Raúl's botched penalty in the waning minutes of the match preserved France's lead and run in the cup. Later in the semifinals against Portugal, Zidane delivered an operatic performance, crushingly beautiful. A ballet of impossible controls and roulettes to get around defenders. He would set himself up as a decoy, shimmy back, stop time, pirouette in the air like a dancer, feign, drag the ball behind his legs, and surge down the flanks.
Zidane showing his strength as well as technique. Oh, wonderful play, but he just overhit the final ball, but the crowd appreciating that.
It was a symphony. The harmonies took the form of through balls and chest traps while turning in the air. There has seldom been such an accumulation of technical prowess on the field. Even when he took a tumble to save a critical play, he managed to keep his uniform absolutely spotless. And he crowned the performance by taking the decisive penalty kick at the 117th minute in extra time.
It's Zidane. France are in the final. Portugal go out in the most dramatic of circumstances. Zidane, arm raised, is on a lap of honor.
The Italian team awaited in the final. It was a genuinely extraordinary team that drew first blood through Marco Del Vecchio. But one of the newcomers, Sylvain Wiltord, popped up and forced extra time at the last possible moment. Now, in extra time, after a finely poised duel throughout, a remarkably young David Trezeguet scored the golden goal, hunting down a cross from the left. After leading his team to another title and earning a place in the history books, Zidane cemented his status as the world's biggest soccer star. That's why Florentino Perez sought him for his Galáctico project at Real Madrid in the summer of 2001. Zidane landed in Madrid as the most expensive transfer in history, 78 million euros, a shocking fee at the time.
David Beckham. It's a great ball from Beckham. And Zidane, oh goodness gracious me, that is absolutely magnificent from Zinedine Zidane.
And during his first season, he won all big years, the very same Champions League that had eluded him on 2 different occasions with Juventus. Naturally, he won it the only way Zidane knew how, through poetry and power.
To Zidane, will he get his second of the night? Oh, the classic step.
With apologies to Marco van Basten in 1988, Zidane scored one of the best volleys in all of history. Without letting the ball touch the ground, he perfectly positioned his body so that Roberto Carlos's lob would tee up a shot on goal. And then he spun. Gravity and physics paused momentarily to allow Zidane to score perhaps the most iconic goal in the history of the Champions League final. Once again, his foot seemed touched by a magic wand.
To Roberto Carlos. It pops out to Zidane! A moment of magic. Inspiration from Zinedine Zidane.
We'll now fast forward to April 25th, 2006, when Zidane announced his retirement. Zidane explained that the strain on his body had finally become too much. However, his last months would be devoted to the World Cup, and his laser focus would be aimed at one last epic moment, lifting the 2006 World Cup before retiring.
Schweinsteiger rolls it for Frinks. He'll smack it in. The Dutch have plenty forward here. There's danger. Chance of a second.
Closing in maybe on goal number 4. Breaks here for Joe Cole. Oh, brilliant! Just brilliant!
So tight to breaking point. Carragher.
Schweinsteiger, who looks like scoring every time he lets fly.
France stumbled into the round of 16 to play Luis Aragonés' Spain, but France was still France, and Zidane was still Zidane, even if the Spanish press insisted on questioning their credentials. The French ended up beating Spain 1-3, thanks in large part to the great Zizou.
He's going to break in! Zidane can finish it off for France! Holding, shooting, Zidane! He's got to go!
During the quarterfinals, the matchup was particularly imposing. France versus Brazil, order versus joy, Henry versus Ronaldo, Zidane versus Ronaldinho. In other words, one last stab at success versus embracing the future. The game was a clash of titans, and France barely made it through. Little by little, and even though Brazil had players like Kaká, Juninho, Ronaldo, and Ronaldinho, France edged the balance of play, or more accurately, Zidane started taking over and pulling the strings. And to think that coach Carlos Alberto Parreira had designed his strategy to shut down Zidane. What he couldn't avoid was that Zidane would deliver a particularly venomous free kick after a foul. It sailed straight to the far post to be finished off by Henry. France ended up winning by a score of 1-0. On the day people wanted Zidane to fade away and pass the crown to Ronaldinho, he reminded everyone that the king had not yet vacated his throne. His performance proved that, for the duration of his reign, he would spend it unmatched. During the semifinals, France came up against an old foe from the 2000 Euros, Portugal, and the former Betis goalkeeper, Ricardo Pereira. So it was. Portugal summoned an outstanding performance but couldn't manage a goal. It was the only opponent who had gone toe-to-toe with France up to that point, and a single isolated moment derailed the entire endeavor. Ricardo Carvalho knocked over Henry inside the penalty box, and Zidane took the penalty. Against all odds, France would compete in another World Cup final only 8 years after the previous one. France faced Italy, which had overcome Germany in a memorable semi. Two unexpected finalists, two aging rosters that went through hell and back in order to set foot in the Berlin Olympic Stadium on July 9th, 2006. But before we get into the final, we should take a brief detour. A few days prior, something may have forever changed the course of events. Medina Cantalejo, the Spanish representative who refereed the France-Brazil match in the quarterfinals, was shaping up as a strong candidate to ref the final. But in the end, the match was given to the Argentinian Horacio Elizondo and his two trusted assistants, Darío García and Rodolfo Otero. Medina Cantalejo was selected as the fourth official. On July 9th at 8 p.m. local time, with the referees lined up and the players ready, Horacio Elizondo's whistle pierced the air. The match quickly picked up steam, and 7 minutes in, a penalty call went in favor of France.
It's Zinedine Zidane here. Oh, it's a goal. How cheeky. Only one of the world's great players would attempt anything as audacious as that, but he nearly paid the penalty, if you excuse the pun.
In a moment full of tension and suspense, Zidane dared to take a Panenka in the World Cup final. It paid off, and the ball flew in. But the joy didn't last long. 10 minutes later, an unexpected character stormed into center stage. He was not even supposed to start in the tournament, but had taken Alessandro Nesta's place, who was out of commission with an injury.
Deep from Pirlo for Materazzi! A moment of near instant redemption.
Materazzi evened the score, but France was on the attack. The names repeated over and over again by the commentators were Cannavaro and Buffon, the heroes of the resistance. But the most important commentary was the one that was happening over in the referees' walkie-talkies. With both teams so evenly matched, the game went to extra time. It was a delicate moment, heart-stopping for the fans. France and Italy were both showing signs of exhaustion, but neither team would budge. Play after play, both teams exchanged attacks until at the 110-minute mark, the game, and the world watching, screeched to a halt. More about what happened next after the break. Near the Italian box, where the corner had just been cleared, two straggling players seemed to be in the middle of a heated argument.
Oh my word! That is extraordinary! A headbutt to the chest of Materazzi.
After exchanging words, subtly and surprisingly, Zidane headbutted Materazzi in the chest, hard. The altercation was so blindingly fast that practically no one saw it. The ball had been some distance away for some time, and the referee and everyone else, frankly, was looking the other way. Keep in mind that in 2006, video assistant referees, or VAR, hadn't been implemented yet. So a headbutt in the World Cup final was about to go unpunished because no one was looking at that part of the field. That is, until the fourth referee speaks up through the walkie-talkie. A Spaniard, Medina Cantalejo, the referee who was supposed to oversee the final in the first place. In a matter of 10 seconds, Zidane's life changed. The line of destiny was irrevocably altered by an abrupt event, still difficult to understand, which modified the vital curve of Zidane and that of his team. Meanwhile, the commentators were watching the replays on their monitors, which showed what everybody had missed in real time. Without protest, Zidane walked off the field, a sullen look on his face. The pictures tell the story. Zidane marching off to the locker room inches away from the World Cup trophy. He left without looking at it, riddled with guilt and the certainty that he wouldn't be able to hoist it. We all felt it. And to the detriment of the French team, the same feeling permeated the penalty shootout. But what actually happened? What exactly did Materazzi say to draw such a severe reaction out of Zidane in such a critical moment? Zidane explained himself after the tournament, in one of the few public occasions in which he has discussed the subject. He spoke to Canal Plus France and explained how he underscored the viciousness of Materazzi's words and how words can be more damaging than actions. Zidane also apologized for his behavior.
Vous savez, moi je vous ai tout dit. Et le plus important, encore une fois, c'est que c'est un geste qui est pas pardonnable.
Materazzi later recounted his side of the story on Instagram Live. After the corner, because he had grabbed Zidane's jersey, Zizou sneered and said he'd give him his shirt after the match. Materazzi clearly didn't appreciate the gesture because he replied, quote, "I'd rather have your sister than your shirt." Perhaps Zidane, even if he didn't know it at the time, was nudged by the universe in a different direction. He couldn't let his career end on such a sour note. The truth is, the game became a semicolon rather than a period. A glorious career tied up neatly in a bow with the World Cup win in his final match. Instead, a new timeline opened. This is Florentino Pérez announcing Zidane as the new coach of Real Madrid in 2016.
Quiero anunciarles también que la Junta Directiva del Real Madrid.
I'd like to announce that the Real Madrid Board of Directors has decided to appoint Zinedine Zidane as the new first-team coach.
He was a legend as a player and is already a legend as a coach. He's transcended into myth, only talked about in hushed tones. A halo and a crown retroactively adorns his every impossible trap, every crucial goal, every stumble and every redemption, every twist of fate. Looking out from a face of calm and poise, Zidane left an indelible mark on those of us who think of soccer as more than a sport, a performance piece, as art, where beauty counts double. The Best Soccer Podcast in the World is a production of Exile Content Studios in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and is hosted by me, Nando Vila. Produced by Ana Isabel Octavio and Zach Lee Rigg. Written by Zach Lee Rigg and Fermin Suarez. Production assistance by Stella Emmett. Our executive producers are Isaac Lee, Rose Reed, and myself, Nando Vila. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. Sound design by Hugo Mendoza. Our awesome theme song is by Lou J. Special thanks to all of the voices that participated in this episode, Alexi Lalas, Gabriele Marcotti. For more podcasts, listen to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.